Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Joel Kellen, and last week I bought the game Resident Evil Village. I was originally planning on waiting for the price to drop, but then I remembered back a few years ago when I had to wait 2 to 3 years for Batman Arkham Knight to become cheaper. So I decided to just bite the bullet and pay the full $60. The story is basically about how Ethan Winters, the main character from Resident Evil Biohazard, he and his wife are living in Eastern Europe 3 years after the events of the 7th game. And Chris Redfield, the series veteran, as well as some members of the BSAA, they break into their home, they kill Mia, and they steal his baby, Rosemary. So while Ethan is trying to get her back, he comes across this village that's full of bioweapons that are related to the mold from the Biohazard game. And he finds out that they're the ones who have his baby, so he has to fight through the entire village in order to get his daughter back. I will say the game was very fun for me. It definitely played up a lot more with the action side of the series. Like a lot more so than Biohazard did. I will get into that in a little bit. The characters are awesome. Like pretty much every single villain and boss fight, with Lady Dimitrescu, Heisenberg, Moreau, and Beneviento, they all have their standout moments. Even the main villain, Mother Miranda, even though she doesn't actually appear too much in the story, she has some really good breakout scenes, especially towards the end. Even the series veteran Chris Redfield, even though he actually doesn't appear a lot in the main story, he has a really good moment to shine, like right before the ending, which was always fun. And the funny thing about that is, so I remember a few weeks ago I made a video that was just a compilation of the gameplay of Chris Redfield during the Not a Hero DLC of Biohazard. And that was my way of explaining why he's not a main character in the series anymore. Like, why you don't go around an entire game playing as his character. And that's just dialed up to 11 in during Chris Redfield's segment. Which is fine, because the moments where you play as him is really fun. To me, it was borderline cathartic, but it also does a really good job to illustrate why you shouldn't expect to play as Chris Redfield in a game that is supposed to be primarily horror-centric. Although that segues into this other point that I was going to make, where I originally said that Resident Evil Biohazard, it wasn't as scary as I had hoped it would be, and Village is even less scary. And I do know that Capcom outright said that they toned down the scares for this one. To me, they just got rid of the scares completely. Because aside from jump scares, where one of the undead just pops out of the ground right in front of you, or if you're just not paying attention and suddenly Lady Dimitrescu is like right there out of the corner of your eye, where if you turn to look at her, boom, she's right there. Aside from those kind of jump scares, there weren't a lot of scenes that I thought were particularly creepy. There were some moments where there's like a creaking of a floorboard or a growling, but there's really nothing there aside from the atmosphere, to me, that made the game scary. Even during the boss fights, well actually especially during the boss fights, it felt way more like an action game, and I know that they were trying to blend horror and action, but to me, those two genres actually mix well better when it's in a movie, not a video game. It was a bit creepy how you basically had to play hide and seek with some of the characters, such as Lady Dimitrescu. To me, all the scares were diminished. Like, say you're in the main hall of the castle, and you find out that you can essentially play Ring Around the Rosie with all those characters, even with the daughters. Where I do remember in the dungeon that the daughter, Bela, I think that one was, could just phase right through one of the dungeon cell's bars and then get right next to you. But every other time when you're like again in the main hall and you're running around a couch or a coffee table or whatever, as far as I remember, they didn't do that. They would just walk right around it. So you could essentially just run around it the entire time, and the AI would have no choice but to just follow you around. And I can't remember if Jack Baker did that in Biohazard, but I was pretty sure that what he did was, at least after a while, he'd just straight up destroy the couch that you were running around, or say break through that one wall that you're hiding behind. So you can't just play Ring Around Rosie with Jack. Meanwhile, with characters like Lady Dimitrescu and her daughters, like you can. That kind of sucked out all the scariness for me, unfortunately. I was really hoping that Village would still have scary moments in it. I mean, I knew it wouldn't be as scary as Biohazard because of what Capcom said. That meant for me personally, it wasn't really scary at all. Aside from that, the action was fun. I will admit that. If you guys remember what I said back during Biohazard, that towards the back half, it started to feel like a Call of Duty game because of all the weapons you get and the sudden swarm of enemies that start to fight you in salt mines specifically. And well, by that time you can have a grenade launcher, a flamethrower, and a shotgun. With Village, that feeling where it feels like just a first-person shooter, to me, that feeling actually came a lot quicker, pretty much around the time that you get the shotgun and then the sniper rifle in Castle Dimitrescu. And that's a shame because, like I said before, I was hoping it would be a little bit scarier. But once you have the sniper rifle and shotgun, you can essentially take out enemies that are completely far away from you, or if they get too close, you can just one-shot them. That's pretty much it for my personal thoughts. But in addition to what other people have said, my complaints are kind of the same as everybody else's at this point. The whole segment with Castle Dimitrescu was way too short. It's also a shame that you can't go back to it either. And then my other complaint that is kind of in line with everybody else is that Ethan did not take Heisenberg's offer. Although I will say, in the character's defense, if you look around Heisenberg's factory, you will find a journal entry where Heisenberg is writing about Rose and Ethan, and he refers to Rose as a brat. And he also is talking about just using Ethan to help him in killing Miranda. So I guess that was their way in showing us that Ethan made the right decision in refusing Heisenberg's offer. Although, if that was the case, then Ethan could have easily just pretended to work with Heisenberg and then just double-cross him like later on once Miranda was dead. But that's how I saw it, at least. But I'm not thinking for a second that Heisenberg actually had Rose's best interests in his mind. Although I do think that Ethan still should have joined up with him. Especially because the way he said that they were going to use Rose, that more or less happened anyway at the end of the story, where Miranda gets depowered when she brings Rose back. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly what Heisenberg was talking about. His plan ended up happening anyway, just without him. And really, the whole thing between Heisenberg and Ethan just came down to a miscommunication. And speaking of miscommunications, or lack of communication, actually, Chris really should have told Ethan that the person he killed in their house was not Mia. He went through the entire game thinking that Chris killed his wife. He actually met up with Chris not once but twice later on in the story. Once when he was in the Rosana Reservoir, and once when they were at the basement of Heisenberg's factory. And it was only until Ethan finally pushed him enough where Chris finally said that no, he didn't kill Mia, he killed Miranda. One of Chris's teammates from his group, Hound Wolf Squad, he outright told him that that he should have told Ethan that that was not Mia. He should have told him the plan. He should have told him that like that was Miranda pretending to be Mia. Good on that guy in game to call out Chris like that. But in my opinion, just because you wrote a character to point out the flaws of the writing does not make it up. Those were all of my complaints with the story itself. Actually, no, there's one more that I had. When you're in House Beneviento, at one point you receive a phone call from Mia, and she's crying and she's telling Ethan that she didn't want Ethan to figure it out this way because it would destroy their family. Now, most likely she's talking about Rose, but I'm also kind of thinking that she might be talking about Ethan himself, especially because towards the end, once Chris finds Mia in Miranda's underground lab, Mia reveals to Chris that she knew that Ethan still had the mold in him for the past 3 years. And she knew that, and she still had a child with him. I think that the phone call in House Beneviento was implying that Mia already knew about the mold, which quickly translates to Donna Beneviento knowing that Ethan has the mold in him. If that is true, if my speculation on that was correct, then that means that that Donna knew about Ethan long before Miranda did. Because even during her boss fight, Mother Miranda is still almost in disbelief. Like, when she first sees Ethan coming back at her after she rips out his heart, she says, like, "Oh wow, I have never seen that before. Clearly, I misjudged you when you're actually fighting her." She does say something along the lines of, "I've never seen someone, like, still standing without their heart. Are you sure you're not one of us?" And I think that was implying that even she was having a hard time believing that. If what I said about Beneviento was true, then that meant that she somehow knew that Ethan was infected with mold, but nobody else knew. Not Chris, not Miranda, only Donna and Mia. And Mia kept it from Ethan and everybody up until the time that Ethan finally died. But maybe I'm looking way too much into that. But aside from that, that's really it. The game was a really good game. I just wish that they had some kind of scares to it and not just jump scares. Because Biohazard, like, that one was actually very creepy up until a point. Meanwhile, Village, they really went all out with the action side of things, which was fine. It's just that when I think of Resident Evil, I think of it being like 75% horror and 25% action, but this one felt like 30% of horror, 70% action, and that 30% was made up of almost all jump scares. But those are just my thoughts. What are your guys's? If you got your own thoughts about this game, just let me know down in the comments. Click up here to watch my playthroughs of Resident Evil Village, and click down there to subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next video.